Hello and welcome to the Fatboss Guide to Iron Quan, 10-man normal in the Throne of Thunder.
Hello.
Yes, and this fight is actually really quite nice, I think. It's quite a simple fight. It's got quite a lot of complexity, but it's a nice, simple 3-phase fight. Well, 4-phase fight as well, but kind of not phases. You'll understand in a minute. That's why we're doing a guide.
For this encounter, you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, and a mixed DPS makeup. However, do not bring a lot of melee.
No.
You want to bring like a maximum of 2. And even bringing 2 complicates things slightly.
Yeah,
just don't bring more than 2, and you'll understand why in a moment. Now, the boss does have like 3 different phases when he's on top of like Quillen mount thingies, and all the abilities in these phases are completely different. However, there's 2 abilities that the boss will do throughout all of these phases that remains the same.
The first one is a stacking tank dot called Impale, and it's the only reason you need to bring 2 tanks to this fight, really. You just taunt on 2, or whenever it drops, and yeah, you'll be fine. That's
simple shit.
Really, really easy.
And the boss also does something called Throw Spear. When he does throw it, it will do damage to whatever player he throws it to, and it will also do an extra ability depending on what phase he is in. It does change on a phase-by-phase basis.
Yeah, you can avoid the spear as well. It does land at a random target's location, so do just make sure you do run away from it, but they do each do a different thing per phase.
Now, the first phase you'll get is Rorschach the Molten Flare. Now, in this phase, the idea is that the boss is desperately trying to get his energy full, because once he does reach full energy, he'll cast an ability called Molten Overload, and this is pretty much a wipe ability.
Yeah.
You could use raid cooldowns to survive this ability if you like popped everything, but essentially it should never happen.
Just don't let it happen.
Just don't let it happen and you'll be fine. Now, there are ways that the boss drops his energy. The first ability that he does to drop it is something called Molten Inferno. Now, he'll just cast this randomly. It does like fire damage to the raid, not a lot, but it will reduce his energy by 10. However, this alone isn't enough to drop his energy, and you need to bait him in another ability called Unleash Flame so that he drops it by even more.
Now, basically, if you have a group of players stacked, the boss will throw a 700k fireball at them, and this damage is split. So, of course, for 3 players, it's split between 3 players. Now, you must have a group of 3 players minimum for the boss to use this ability, so you just all stack up on 1 point.
Now, every time he casts this ability, this will reduce his energy by 30. However, he will only do this ability when he has more than 30 energy. He can't just cast it whenever he wants. He has to have that energy stored to do it.
Now, this leaves a debuff on anyone who is hit by this, but called Scorch, and this will increase the damage you take from any fire by 20% for 30 seconds. So what you need to do is make 3 groups of players. You'll have a group of 3, a group of 3, and a group of 4, and you want to stack Scorch to 2 and maybe sometimes 3. Maybe you want to stack it to 3 for the group that has 4 in it, but you can pretty much get away with it by having each group stack up the Scorch to 2 times. So you are hit by the Unleash Flame 2 times each time.
Now, this is the main reason why you don't want to bring more than 2 melee, because if you say have 3 melee, then you have 5 people in melee, including the tanks, that is, which means you're going to have a group of 5 and then a group of 2 and then a group of 3, which isn't good.
Yeah,
so
it doesn't work.
Bring a maximum of 2 melee, and then that way you'll have the tank group, which will consist of those 2 or 1 melee, in this case, in this footage, and then you'll have a group of 3 and a group of 4.
Now, the boss's spear, of course, because it gets like empowered every time he goes into a different mount, and for this one it does something called Burning Cinders. Now, this just makes magma lines come from the spear, and basically if you run across the lines and you take damage from the lines, you are left with a stacking fire dot, and this does last a long time. Now, sometimes like you do need to run across these lines if you need to group up with your group. Say it does land in the middle of the group and you'll run in different directions and you're like, oh shit, we got to group up now because of the Unleashed Flames coming in. You will need to run across each other, so you will need to run across the line, so that's something that your healers need to be aware of, but if you only get like 1 stack, it's nothing really too bad.
Now, once you do manage to kill this guy, you'll then get the next guy, which is Quetzal the Stormcaller.
The lightning guy.
Yeah, the lightning guy. In this phase, you'll gain new abilities. One of the new abilities is Arcing Lightning. This will zap a random player and it will stun them. While they are stunned, they are absorbing all healing effects, and they will start dealing damage to nearby players. Now, the only way to remove this and to remove the stun is by clicking on the player.
Yeah.
It works much like the Amber Traps from Winlord Melgerak in Heart of Fear.
Except so you don't get a debuff.
Except you don't get a debuff. So you literally just run over, click them, that's it. It will be removed.
Now, the main ability that the boss does really in this phase is something called Windstorm. Now, this will pull all the players into the middle of the room and in the middle of the Windstorm. Now, while you're inside, you are taking a large amount of ticking damage, and all healing and damage that you do is reduced by 80%. Not only this, that tornadoes are rushing around in a circular pattern, you need to avoid them and rush towards the entrance of the room. In terms of actually getting out the Windstorm, I know that the Warlock portals work, so if you do put a Warlock portal down because you know exactly where the middle of the room is, you can get all your healers to click it and then 2 additional people who are terrible at moving. That's one way of making sure that you can get out of it nice and quickly. Also having movement speed increases like Stampeding Roar from a Druid, that's really helpful for the Windstorm as well. But the main thing is that you all leave at the same side, and the best side to really group up in is the entrance where you do enter the room. Now once the storm is over, some of the tornadoes will survive and they will start moving randomly around the room. You just got to avoid them. You should be absolutely fine.
Now the spear in this phase will do something called Storm Cloud. Now if you are stood inside like the beamy lines that are created from the lightning, you'll take quite a lot of damage. Not only that, you'll get a debuff. If this debuff reaches 3 stacks, you'll be stunned for 20 seconds. So guess what?
Don't stand in it.
Don't stand in it. That's all you have to do. Now once you manage to deal with the Windstorms and you've killed this bastard, you'll get the last guy, which is Dameron the Frost Sage. Now this guy is arguably the easiest out of the 3, and like his main ability that he does is something called Dead Zone. This will cover 2 sides of his body with a shield, and this shield, if you're facing it and you're DPSing from this side, will just make you miss. You cannot hit the boss while these shields are active on those particular sides. So you need to position yourself in such a way that you can actually see the boss without a shield being in the way, so you can actually damage him.
Now if this does mean that you're going to have to take the longest trek in the whole world and also run across loads of AoE and maybe die, just wait for it to end. Honestly, but otherwise you do want to try and position yourself so you can actually get there. The boss also has something constantly on him called Frozen Resilience. This just reflects back 10% of the damage you do to him. It's not really that noticeable, but other abilities do a large amount of AoE damage, so maybe when that comes in I wouldn't recommend popping your combustion then, or anything like that, so just keep an eye out on that, but it's nothing really too major.
Another ability the boss does is Threes. This is an ability that will put a debuff on a random player, and after 1 to 5 seconds, the boss will shatter them, and then when the boss does shatter them, it will deal damage to everyone in the raid. It's quite a large amount of damage, so you need to make sure that people are topped before this does explode.
Yeah, to be honest, it's like the only real ability that does a hell of a lot of damage in this phase. Now, of course, the spear is empowered for this phase as well, and it's empowered with something called Frozen Blood. Now, of course, if the beams come out of it, and if you stood in it, you're going to take a high amount of damage. But also, it gives you a debuff, and which slows your movement, melee, ranged, and cast speeds by 25%, and this stacks. So if you stand it for too long and get 4 stacks, not only are you rooted in place, but you got 100% extra cast and everything speed. So that's bad. Don't stand in any of the lines. None of them are good. Just learn not to stand in lines and you'll be absolutely fine.
And once you've managed to kill the Frost guy, you'll have the last phase, which is Last Stand. Now in this phase he does lose his spear, and that means that he'll now use an ability called Fist Smash. He'll just slam his face into the ground for about 7.5 seconds, and while this is going on, he'll just do AoE physical damage on the raid. Now, you can't do anything to avoid this, so the best way of doing it is just stacking up behind the boss, so you can just AoE heal it.
Now at the beginning of this phase it doesn't do a hell of a lot of damage, but towards the end it really does start hurting because of an ability called Rising Anger. Now this is just a 10% damage increase that he gives himself, and this just stacks as the fight goes on. So yeah, it really does start hurting. You want to be using raid cooldowns and stuff and save it towards the end rather than using them all at the beginning.
Now because the tornadoes are still active from the Stormcaller phase, the boss will also do various different things to the cyclones that are still active, all the tornadoes that are going around. Now he can ignite them, which makes it so they start doing AoE taking damage on the raid. It's not high AoE taking damage, so you don't really need to worry about it too much. It's just more AoE healing, which is more reason to stack up. However, some cyclones he will freeze them, and when he freezes them, it just makes it if you are picked up by them, you take even more damage than you usually would.
Yeah.
It's about 5% of your max health every 2 seconds, as well as the normal tornado damage.
Yeah.
So just don't get caught by these.
Now this is the reason really why you are still killing him at the entrance of the room, because even though it is a more confined space, the tornadoes don't really like to go there very often. They like filling up the rest of the room a lot more. So if you are by the entrance, it isn't actually that bad, and you can pretty much, there's no excuse by getting picked up by the tornadoes. So So yeah, if you stand at the entrance after you've done the Windstorm boss and you keep sacking there for the rest of it until the boss is dead, you shouldn't have any issues from the tornadoes anyway, as long as you have some basic movability skills.
And if they do come over, just avoid them. It's as simple as that.
Hard.
And essentially the fight is just killing him before his fist smash becomes too deadly.
That's pretty much the fight. It's a nice fight though. I do like it, all the different phases and that. It's lovely.
So thanks for watching. This guide did help out. Please do drop us a like, and we'll see you for our next guide.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks.